Welcome back, folks, and thank you so much for joining me for another beautiful soul-driven discussion. Today, I am really excited to introduce you to our guest, Bloom Post, who's a ceremonialist, shamanic healer, teacher, and author. Welcome to Soul Driven, Bloom.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I'm very excited for this conversation, very excited for a lot of the topics that we are going to be covering today. So a little bit about how I came across Bloom. I listened to her first on a podcast interview back in 2020, and we were trying to figure that out, what podcast it was, but I can't remember. But just so much of what she shared really resonated with me. I found her to be very open and interesting and soulful, and ended up following her on YouTube and have utilized a number of the videos that she shares there for different processes, one of which is cord clearing. And so that's one of the topics that we're going to be getting into today. And as many of you know, especially if you've been listening to the podcast, energy has been such an important topic. And so I'm really excited to be diving in with Bloom on that and coming at it from a bunch of different areas. But before we dive into all of that, Bloom, my first question I ask all of my guests: what makes you soul driven?
That's a great question. I would say that I'm soul driven because my commitment to remembering who I really am, who I truly am, and what I'm here to do, what I would call my soul mission, which is really a big piece of my work on the planet with others. The word driven is interesting. Language is really important to me, and the power of language. And I was incredibly driven when I first started this work almost 25 years ago. And now I'm a little bit older and hopefully a little bit wiser. And it's interesting how the word driven and drive is changing for me. Not that you mean it that way, but it's just an interesting languaging. So I was actually sitting with this idea of soul driven. But as far as letting my soul drive the car, so to speak, it's really for me about remembering what we're truly capable of and embodying that in a very tangible way right here, right now on this planet.
I love that. I love that you brought in like remembering who you are, because I think that is such a huge part of the journey of being soul driven, right? Is being able to reconnect with who we are on the inside, who we've always been. Because how can we really be soul driven if we don't remember that, right? It's certainly an unfolding and a journey, but
oh, for sure. If we don't remember who we are, then we fall back on habits and we fall back on the programs that are passed down, learned, inherited, DNA, what have you. And we end up letting the things around us determine our focus and our journey. And so really allowing that internal pillar to be activated and truly embodying our, at the beginning, it's embodying our willingness to remember. And then we get to this place where we start remembering, and we're really embodying what some people call magic, what some people call power with a big P, not a little p, what some people call soul infused. There's lots of names for it. But yeah, it is a journey, and it's a practice, because there's always opportunities to get distracted, to forget all over again, to think we've healed that. Oh, that's done, that's healed, I'm good. And then boom, there it is again. It's a circular, like a labyrinth. It's this labyrinthine, I hope that's a word, journey. And yeah, so it is a practice. It's not just, even when someone has like that enlightenment moment, then the practice really can amplify.
Yeah. Even even as I was saying just a moment ago, just like knowing yourself. I'm like, wait a minute, that's such a huge thing.
Right.
That's like such a lifelong thing. Like that doesn't just like, oh, hey, this is who I am. Like freaking forget about it. Every time I think I have a little bit of a handle on who I am, then like things shift and change. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, hey, you. and or
Right.
some other side pops out and I'm like, oh, okay, so there's that. And
Yeah, and I feel part of the practice is to really enjoy that process. It does not feel fun all the time. It doesn't feel fun definitely at first. And it empowers a lot of learning experiences, the opportunity to let go of cultural baggage and the programming and the belief systems, the things that we think make us who they are. When we start to let that go, there can be a lot of cognitive dissonance. And that can be very distressing for people at lots of levels. So yeah, this idea of knowing who we are and allowing that to unfold and change. We're not static. It's like watching a flower. You know, the flower didn't start out a flower, it was a seed. The seed is just as vital and it returns to seed. And we have those cycles too. So just like you were saying, when we have those processes you're talking about, when we can learn to appreciate and explore that instead of going, oh, dang it, another, whatever, another, then it definitely gets a little easier along the journey. For sure.
absolutely. We were talking about the importance of laughter even before we started recording. So I am very excited to talk about multiple things today. But of course, before we do, I would love for you to introduce yourself, share a little bit about your background and how you came to the work that you're doing today.
Sure. Bloom Post. I live in the mountains of Western North Carolina that are the oldest mountain range in the world, which I absolutely love. They're so ancient. They're these almost like grandmother mountains. They're very different than, not better or worse, just different than the taller young mountains in other parts of the world, and young being a relative term, of course. But these ancient mountains just carry so much medicine. And I grew up here and grew up with a lot of trauma and abuse, narcissism, the whole 9 yards, lots of things. And so I needed healing, and I always felt drawn to mystical things, magical things. I didn't necessarily know what shamans were when I was young, but I was always drawn to those places. And so I don't know how old I was, I'm trying to remember. I had a lot of challenges and lived a very asleep life, while being incredibly sensitive and highly empathic. I didn't know that I was an empath. I didn't know what an empath was. I didn't know what a narcissist was. I didn't know about healing trauma, those things. So I guess when I was 29 or so, I ended up in a psychiatric ward, and I had what Malidoma Patrice Somé calls my birth as a healer. And Malidoma is passed away in the last few months, a powerful teacher from Africa, just really such an inspiration. But learning later in life that really was a big initiatory opening for me. And I ended up finding a shaman to work with shortly after that experience, who changed my life and helped me stay on the planet, because I don't know how I would have stayed on the planet if I had continued in that trajectory. I needed to be able to embody my gifts, my medicine, and my what the world might consider quirky or not normal or outside the box. And up until about 29, they felt like curses. My abilities felt like a curse. But after working with this shaman and then starting to learn from him and train with him, I realized this was all I wanted to do was heal. I wasn't even thinking about how I would do it with other people. I just wanted to heal. And so that morphed into recognizing my abilities as a healer and as a ceremonialist, and working with people to empower them to walk through those initiations and traumas as well. And I've been doing it since, in some form or fashion, since 1999. So
It
that's a
feels to
very
me,
condensed version of my life, but those are the bullet points.
It's always interesting to me that those of us who grow up to step into that role of healer come from very traumatic backgrounds and childhoods, and you know, at whatever point in life, it sounds like it was right around your Saturn return when things really shifted for you, but like we get activated and things start shifting and we want to then start helping others, you know, like I feel like it opens this door of compassion and understanding that those who don't have traumatic childhoods don't often have, at least that has just been in my experience. I think it really opens a different door. I find it very interesting.
I hear everything you're saying, and I do believe that it works that way for a lot of people. For me, it did those, that's not the languaging I would use at all. It didn't feel like an activation. It felt like I was dead. It felt like I was absolutely torn to bits in the abyss of insanity. And so I absolutely had to go through a death initiation. And that's the shaman part. You know, I literally was dying, and I was dying for years and just didn't know it. And the psychiatric ward was like this culmination of this initiatory experience. And so perhaps I was activated in that moment. I definitely had activated experiences, but I can honestly, and I want to share this because I think some people listening will hear the words that you're saying, but that might not be how it felt for them. So they might not understand that, yes, that might be the moment where you're getting activated, but it sure doesn't always feel like that. You know what I mean? So for me, it was a death experience. It was a dying. And coming out of that, I didn't feel any extra compassion for other people that I didn't already feel before. And at that time, what I felt was desperate to heal, or I couldn't stay on the planet. And I want to be honest and authentic about that, because often, as you say, healers coming from these traumatic backgrounds, it can be messy. It's not all gooey love and light. Not that you were implying that it was at all. I just want to be clear that it can be. I'm sure you're laughing from personal experience, but yeah, it can be really messy. And I'm always very authentic about that and very honest. I did a TEDx talk where I talked about the psychiatric ward and how they said, "You're not crazy. Take these pills." Then I meet this shaman who says, "You might be crazy, but it's in a good way. Let me show you how to use it." And that's what changed my life. Not someone saying, you know, whatever. It was, "Hey, you're in the muck, you're in the shiz. Yeah, medicine, let's do this." And so it was a slog for a lot of years. But back to your point of, yes, many people who feel called to do some sort of healing work in the world, often, more often than not, come from backgrounds where they needed healing. And teachers are teaching what they need to learn. Healers are helping others with what that personal healer has needed to heal. And often we're walking other people through things we're still learning. We're never complete. We're never done. If someone thinks they're complete, then that's mind-boggling to me, because as you said, it's a journey. So yeah, perhaps it was an activated time around 29 years old, but I would say it was an initiation, and it was a death. And it was my first shamanic death of a few more that happened, even as I was working with people and leading ceremony. You know, the shaman's path is different than other paths in that it is a path of initiation, and it is a path of death and rebirth, very literally. And that's been lost in the Western colonizing of that, you know, term and that work. And it was not, I want to say it's not a path I chose, although I did, but not consciously per se. I remember Shaman John was my first teacher, and sitting with him and saying, "Can I get off this path at any point? Like, am I able, am I allowed?" And he said, "Of course." I was like, you know better. I mean, I have had to just, my guides have pulled me by my ear sometimes, pouting and, you know, whatever, just not, you know, I can't do it anymore. And then the breakthrough. So for me, it felt like the breakdown before the breakthrough. And I'm grateful that I've done enough inner work that I don't generally have to have that kind of breakdown to break through anymore. But at the time, it was my first true breakdown for breaking through. And so, yeah, I do believe that it brings many people many people with trauma do end up wanting to be in service to others, whether that's as a being the best soccer mom you can be, or working at a bank, or whatever it is. There's still that sensitivity because of what they experience. So ultimately, I'm agreeing with you while also taking on a very circuitous answer there. But it's important to me to be really honest and authentic about my experience. It was messy.
No, absolutely. I mean, we talk about the mess a lot on Soul Driven, and my path has also been extremely messy. My life has also been very messy. And, you know, I think that that is just part of it. It's part of the journey. And it's definitely like, this is the last thing of, or the furthest away from light and love type of podcast. It's just about being real here. So I'm glad that you shared that. Absolutely. And feel into all of that very much. I think that it is very important to be honest about what we go through. And I think for me, you know, and this is just, the word activation is actually something that's just come into my space really in the past month. And it really, I mean, like, my activation that is just now taking place has been like 2 messy years in the making. So, and not to the point where I was in a psych ward, but everything falling apart so that it can be pulled back together. That very much that death, rebirth process. And I think that's why, you know, I was drawn to you and drawn to your story, because I certainly remember resonating with just how genuine you were in that podcast. So thank you for sharing that. I'm really curious, and this is just a bit of like a personal curiosity. So in regards to like having this sort of shamanic soul, is like, what is your relationship with nature and animals? Where does that lie for you?
It's incredibly important. I don't feel that nature and animals are separate from me at all. When I work and open sacred space, honoring the ancestors, especially the indigenous ancestors, I live on land that is Cherokee ancestral land. This whole area is not just, you know, the whole North Carolina, Western North Carolina. Honoring those who came before, and honoring that, you know, the mountains are our ancestors, the trees are our ancestors, these animals are our ancestors, and we are ancestors right now, living and breathing. And I personally don't believe that time is linear. So the lifetimes, timelines, dimensions, and realms are all happening. So these ancestors are also having their experience as we are. That wasn't really your question. Your question was about nature, but nature being part of that ancestral energy. So for me, it's about listening and creating relationship with the natural world. The mountains have their own personalities and spirits. As I mentioned, the mountains here are so old, and they curve like a woman lying down on her side, as opposed to being really pointy and jagged, and talking to particular mountains and connecting with the spirits of them. And in the Andes, they call them apus or apukuna. The apu is a mountain. It also means a king and a priest and some other things. But, you know, they believe that they each have their own spirit, and that the spirit of the mountain can die if not, you know, cared for. And so we see that happening with development and things like that. I listen to even the songbirds. The songbirds will go nuts on the land here, and I'll know that something's going on. Either a hawk is about, I usually hear the hawk before the songbirds tell me, or it means a bear's come through, or a cat decided to cruise onto the land or something, you know, like, or sometimes they're just really happy, but I listen to them. They're communicating. They'll let you know. I know when it's getting ready to rain, besides looking at, you know, if a big storm is coming, my land gets really quiet and everybody's disappeared, you know, things like that. When you're paying attention, it's the way people used to live. It's the way ancestors long ago would listen to nature. They knew when the tsunami was coming. They knew when the storm was coming. They knew when a bear or some kind of animal of prey was coming through, because they're connected and listening. So for me, it's about relationship and connecting with animals and trees and plants. And I mean, gardening is my therapy. I must have my hands in the earth during this season, you know, and growing my own food and eating food as medicine, which is also part of connecting with nature. So yeah, nature is incredibly important to all of us, but yes, for sure important to the work that I do.
Yeah. My favorite new morning routine, which started popping up in 2020. I wasn't aware that, because I live downtown here in Wilmington, and we have a back stoop. And honestly, I'd never really gone out on it, not really hung out on it. And then 2020, I started spending my mornings there and making friends with the birds and the squirrels. And like, it's just honestly kind of my favorite part of the day. I love starting, like, I can't sit out there and not be laughing and smiling. I can be in the worst mood because I can really wake up in some bad moods, but like, all I have to do is go out there and, you know, give a peanut to one of my little squirrel friends, and like, they just crack me up. They fill me with so much love.
That's the best part about living in an urban area too. I live in the country. These squirrels are like, we don't know you. We'll eat the stuff you put out here, but we're not going to let you feed us a peanut, right? But when you're in town, the animals are not as afraid of you. And so you can interact in a very different way. And I've seen videos and different things of people really getting to know nature in a city. And so I love that you are finding that even within a more urban space, because nature really is everywhere. I mean, I have a pollinator garden for the birds and the bees and the butterflies. And one of the things I grow is milkweed for monarchs. So I have monarchs every year. It's awesome. But there's this milkweed that's growing, not even near there, just growing up out of a crack in the of the driveway, that part of the driveway that's paved. And I'm like, hey, milkweed, what are you know, just coming up like just resilience, you know, coming through that crack of cement. And so I water it and let it grow. And yeah, it's really beautiful the way nature can find its way through the cement and the urban landscape, and we can still connect. And people can also just grow a plant. I'm amazed how many students I'll sit with and they'll say, oh, I'm terrible at growing plants. I'm like, no, you're really not. It's just a forgetting. It's a disconnect. Try it. You know, it's so much easier than people realize. And even having plants in pots in your home, if you're in a super, super urban place, is such a great way to bring in that green and that, talk about feeding your soul and literally your breath and connecting with the plant spirits and that energy. Yeah, it's so vital.
Yeah, you're speaking my language completely. Thankfully, I grew up in a home where my parents always had tons of plants, and like, that's just a necessity wherever I go. When it comes to decoration, I'm like, books, plants, and I'm pretty good.
Oh, wait, I forgot a bed, but I've got books and plants. I'm good. I'll sleep on the books. Yeah. Those are the important things in life, books and plants. I'm right there with you.
So before we transition, I do want to ask real quick, because I'm just, again, curious. And I know that my listeners would also really like to know, like, what would you consider some traits of like a shamanic soul, like someone who might be more drawn to this from your perspective?
Drawn to work with someone, or drawn to do it themselves, walk that path?
Either or.
Okay.
You know, I think just someone with a shamanic soul, like, what are some of the traits?
Yeah, you know, I mean, I feel like we all have a shamanic soul. It's just a matter of whether we choose to explore that aspect of ourselves. But definitely people who feel sensitive to energies, perhaps have oracle abilities, psychic abilities, very much in tune with nature. But that, you know, again, I'm saying a lot of general things, so this could draw a lot of people in. I mean, the shamanic path, as I said, is traditionally it's a path of power. So if someone feels that they've lost their power, which is very much how I felt growing up, I didn't have that terminology for it, but it's exactly how I felt. I just didn't have my power. Then someone could be drawn to that. It's not I wouldn't say it's the easiest path, you know, doing walking a path of doing, like an energy worker path or a channeler or something. I'm not saying those are easy or simple, but it could possibly be a lot more easy than feeling called to a shamanic path. But the work that I do, I have trained traditionally while also working with my guides in the realms so that I can work with anybody pretty much. I mean, I'm not called to work with everybody, but I have learned over the years to integrate the traditional with what especially the Western mind needs, because the Western mind needs psycho spiritual healing, not simply spiritual healing. Our brains, we're dealing with different stuff, and we overthink everything. And we have more of a disconnect, right, than the indigenous folks walking traditional paths. And so as far as the people who might be called to do the work, and with someone like me, I have made it accessible to people, whether they want to walk a shaman's path or not. And even if it's not something they want to do that kind of healing work forever, it could still very accessible to everybody. But for those who want to walk that path, you want to go sit with someone who does, the work and see how it resonates for you, because it's not for everybody. But it's also one path and a path of many, and there's lots of ways to do the work.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting, just an interesting question that I feel kind of comes out a little bit differently depending upon who you're talking to. So, wonderful. So let's shift into energy, which is just one of my favorite topics as of late. And I guess first, I'm just kind of curious if you have personally really been feeling this intense pull to okay, this is really like a multi-pronged question, so we can dive into it from whatever direction you feel. But I have been feeling such a huge push, and also experiencing this in my own life, to not only encourage and show people how to energetically protect them, but it has just become such a massive thing in my own life. I feel like with the times, over the past few months, I feel like it's come in really strongly, and it's always been a part of my practice, but I feel like it has really come in strong just in the past few months, like I just mentioned. But I'm curious if you have felt this or experienced this, or kind of where you're at with that. And then I'd also love to hear where energetic protection comes in for you, if that is a part of your practice, or just whatever you'd like to speak on regarding that.
So in your first question, you're asking more specifically about energetic protection really being necessary at this time?
I was just curious, if you have been feeling whoosh, it's just
Right.
felt like the energy has shifted so intensely that, I personally 100% cannot wake up in the morning anymore without putting on my protection almost immediately, because there's so much in the collective. Okay. So I was just curious if you have also been experiencing that.
No, I have not, but that's because I took care of that years ago. So those of you who are still needing to learn about sovereignty, yes, you need to be putting yourself in that bubble of light or whatever you're doing. That's automatic for me. I don't need to protect anymore, but I've been doing this work for years to get to a place where, and I don't mean that in a snooty way at all. I just mean coming from experience of years. I feel the energies you're talking about, but they can't mess with me. Because of the work I've been doing over the years. So I don't play in those realms anymore where they can mess. They go mess with the people who are still learning to not get messed with, if that makes sense. And that just comes with time and experience. And I'm in my 50s and I've been doing this a while. I used to work with energetic protection. That's the way I was trained, working with plant medicine, and especially ayahuasca, traditionally needing to the maestros, the vegetalistas leading ceremony, needing to protect themselves from brujos who would, attack them and try to take their power. And it's not just in ayahuasca, that's in a lot, you know, that can be found in other spaces too. Not in all spaces, not everybody works that way, but it is a traditional way that things have happened. So so I was trained about the whole energetic protection and being attacked and all of that. And I walked through that for a number of years before I learned from my guides, if I'm in a protective stance, I'm creating defense. And if I'm creating defense, I'm creating resistance. And whatever I resist persists. Oh, so it's like every time I create that protection, I'm inviting in the need to use it. So that started transitioning for me over the years of doing this work. And I started shifting to, I was still looking for languaging for it, like energetic clarity, you know, using words besides protection, because there's times when we need that, but it's also a defensive stance, which invites in the opportunity for it to be checked to see if what we got there works, right? So what I've learned over the past 2.5 decades is to be in sovereignty, which I believe is exactly what you're doing every morning when you're like girding your loins energetically, right? You're coming back to your sovereignty. You're coming back to your autonomy. And sovereignty, you know, we call the sovereign queen sovereign because she's a country unto herself. Nobody gets to tell her how to run the show, right? So when you're sovereign unto yourself and you create your own, what I call my medicine world space, I live in my medicine world space so that I'm in the world, but not of the world, right? As Jesus said. So it's not that I don't feel and hear and have my feels and opinions about all the things, especially lately with Supreme Court votes and all these things and the rights of women and the rights of marginalized people and LGBTQIA and indigenous rights and Black Lives Matter. I have all of my feels about that. I also am at a point where I'm working more within the matrix as opposed to within the story. I still sign petitions. I still make my voice heard. I still am an ally for people. I'm about being anti-racist. Like we need to do the third dimensional. We need to show up and be an ally, especially as people with white skin and the privilege that we carry because of that. And I'm also doing work in spaces that are not where a lot of people are working. And there are some of us that do that work there because we're called. It's like working on a different part of the starship or whatever. We've all got important jobs. I just happen to be going into some spaces that I don't really talk about much unless people are really called to go into those places. So I work with this idea of protection, really coming back to a place of sovereignty. And I have guides that I work with in the realms. I activate the energetic grid. And I do that every day to simply remind myself that I'm in it. And then when the waves come, because that's the thing, like kind of circling back to what we were talking about at the very beginning, like remembering who we are, tapping in with our gifts and our abilities, then we're really strong in our inner pillar. So when we're standing strong in our inner pillar and those waves come, we don't get bowled over. You know, we can stand strong. And then eventually you can just surf them. And that's what I do at this point, is surf those waves, right? Whenever I can. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying I don't have emotions or I mean, yesterday I woke up so grumpy and I was like, and I was just poopy all day. I messaged a friend of mine. I'm like, I am just like annoyed by life today. What is up? And so I just excavated it and worked with it. And, you know, it doesn't mean I don't have my feelings, but I don't need to protect at this point, because it's simply, I'm not living in certain programs and paradigms anymore that people that I did live in and had to walk through and learn and do my work, commit to my work and my healing, so that I don't, you know, those waves don't bowl me over like they used to.
I love that. I feel like what you're talking about is exactly what I do every day, because it's definitely, for me at least, I am, just as you said, just as Jesus said, in the world, but not of the world. And that's certainly where I want to be. And I definitely want to be a part of everything that's going on. And I advocate for that, you know, for everyone to do what they feel called. But I know that I can't show up and be who I'm supposed to be if I am not, you know, really making that a top priority for myself.
Oh
So
yeah. I mean, you
help.
definitely have to do your own work before you can really be in service to others, for sure. I tell people all the time, stop jumping out of the boat, you know, to try to get other people in. You got to stay in the boat. You got to do your self-care first. You got to do your work. And then, you know, then you can lift an arm out and help and show people how to get in. Yeah, for sure.
Exactly. So help me understand then the difference. And I know just like if I was listening, I would be kind of confused because I feel like the difference, like what you're talking about, how like putting up this protection where it kind of calls more to you versus the sovereignty. So like maybe give me a practical example of like how those would look each way. Because I know for me, like every morning, you know, I call my energy back to me. I call in guides that I have. I ask them to be with me, clear out my mind, clear out my energetic field, you know, those sorts of things, and just make sure that what is in me is mine, or something that might be in my highest and best if that comes. But so that is like a general overview of what I do. But what would does that feel similar to you in regards to like the sovereignty piece, or does that feel more like protection? Or I just love to have like a practical kind of example to differentiate the two.
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a lot of nuance to the answer, though. Some of it will be what's excavating the energy that's underneath it, the energy that's behind it, and really
Like
being
the
willing.
intention.
Yeah, the intention will be more at the top. The intention will be what we think the intention is. And then underneath that will be what programs are running that intention. So sometimes people set this intention that they're going to be protected in love and light, and they don't think that they're bringing any fear to it. But there can be those subtle, nuanced energies. They're running under the surface. And until we do the healing work to find out that's coming up, we don't know. And there's nothing wrong with that. We don't know until we know. That's why we do the work. But that's why I encourage people to commit to doing your healing work. So, you know, working with people as I do in lots of different ways, but soul retrieval and different things to really excavate what's underneath the need for protection. And even as you feel, I don't mean you, I mean the royal you, even as you feel great, I'm surrounding myself, calling in my guides, everything feels great. Then, you know, a wave comes and you feel this need for it. That to me says there's something there going on. The fact that you feel the need for it, no judgment, just have awareness of, oh, why do I feel the need to really be doing this right now? And so just excavating that with curiosity of what is it, you know, you said you're feeling this energy in the last few months. Okay, what is it I'm feeling? What's it triggering? What's it activating? What programs am I running that it's even getting my attention? And just with curiosity, really being willing to excavate deeper and deeper and deeper, just rooter down into that, and until you really start getting into the seeds of the programs. And so that to me is what the work is about. And you can, again, the royal we can all do work at a certain place. Level is a weird term, but I have to use this English language and these human words. So there can be often the intention will be one thing, and people think that they're sovereign in their intention, but they're not really autonomous with that energetically, and they don't realize it. So again, not speaking to you per se, speaking in answer to the question. So for me, the work is about really being willing to excavate that, because then you can feel the nuance between what is protection from defense or fear or trigger or reactivity, and what is simply being in the world without any need for protection, because you are protected, because you also don't need protection, because you're always safe. Because, you see what I'm saying? It's this, again, that spiraling. So it's a nuanced thing that takes time to live into and to heal into, and then you drop in and you feel the difference. So when I activate the grids and do that, one, I do it because I work from home. And so I'm bringing other people's energies and what they're carrying into my space. And two, I do it because they're my friends. It's like when you go out and visit with the squirrels, it's kind of like that. I'm like, hey, everybody, good morning. How are you? And I'm acknowledging the grid and the space and the medicine world and all the things that I've created shamanically to work with, acknowledging that because I'm human, and that's part of my practice, is to make sure I remember. I'm not activating it for protection. I'm simply going, oh, look at this. Yay, I'm so glad this space is here. Hey, everybody. Does that make sense? It's very nuanced, and I have no judgment about how anybody's doing it. I'm just coming from a place of having spent enough decades where there will be those subtle shifts that you'll feel as you go. And even in my journey, you know, when the pandemic happened and we're getting gaslighted, I felt triggered by all the gaslighting. We've got millions of people dying and nobody's communicating. Like I was like, ooh, this is triggering some childhood gaslighting stuff. Let me go look at it. Like it brought up that fear, or that safety thing rather, which is fear, right? So there's always new places, even for me, to go find little seeds, little nuggets, right? So when shamanism is such a pain in the butt that way, everything's yes and yes, right? That's shamanism. Everything's yes and yes. It's all yes. You'll know it when you know it. You'll feel it when you feel it. It'll drop in. And the biggest piece to check is the ego, because people think they've dropped in, and the ego might be kind of running the show. And so constantly excavating so that the ego is simply a tool that is part of our journey, and not convincing us that we're all healed up, good to go.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, I mean, I guess what I'm really taking from that, or at least like the way it really resonates with me, just to kind of simplify it maybe even further down. And this is, of course, just from my own understanding, is, again, like I kind of mentioned a second ago, like the intention of, like when I call this in the morning, or like when I realize I'm being kind of pulled, I don't do it from a place of fear. It's more so, again, just a place so that I can come back to myself. And I definitely make sure to leave that that open space of, you know, anything that's in my highest and best, like that ability for things to come through, because of course they do come through. And I feel like within that space, the things that do really affect me or rock me are these things that need to be looked at, versus feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm scared of the world. I'm scared of everything happening. Also, I love hanging out with my guides too. Like life is better with them, with me. But like, I feel like that's different than like it kind of feels, and I know that these are a bit extreme, but again, just to try and simplify, like the other side kind of being like, I'm scared from a place of fear. I need to be protected. I can't be out here on my own. Come help me take care of everything. Like that sort of a difference. Is that, I know that, again, that's sort of general and more extreme.
I mean,
but
that's a good simplification, but I'm talking about the nuances of having the things that we say, our intention, our energy body, and then our physical body doing three completely different things energetically. And that can be happening when people don't know it. They think they're coming from, their intention is to be from this space. And then I'm looking at them and their intentions here and their bodies here and their energy bodies over there. And their actual motivation is over here. And they don't recognize that they're not sovereign they're not all, you know, sovereign within themselves. And that's where the healing work comes in, because we learn to live, especially if people have grown up with any kind of trauma, we learn to live kind of disjointed and separated from ourselves. And that's where the disconnect from nature comes from. And the or people will be so into nature and animals and can't deal with humans. They'll kind of go the opposite direction, but it's still a disconnected space that's not really balanced. So there can be those two spaces you're talking about. I'm kind of talking about this more middle area because it's really important to me to be aware of that space and the nuance. I've seen a lot of spiritual bypass in the world, and different things. And so that nuanced place is what I'm speaking to, because it's more obvious what you just said. Yes, there's both of those. There's kind of, like you said, the bookends there where it's more obvious to people. But if someone is like, hey, I'm good, I'm not feeling scared, that's great. Come back to that nuanced place and just look and see if your intention, your energy body, your physical body, your motivation, when you deep down go into all the excavated seeds of the programs, see if they're still in alignment. And
that
that's
makes total sense.
Okay, good. Because I was going to say that's not exactly an easy thing to explain. So it might be still a little amorphous for people, but it's a nuanced place that can be challenging to put language to.
Yeah, for sure. That's why I wanted to just kind of keep diving into it, because I definitely want folks to, I think, be able to have something to walk away with and think about. And I definitely see when you were kind of breaking those up, it's like, yeah, I might think that this is my intention and I might think that this is what I'm doing. And then like my traumatized self in the middle, this is what is actually happening underneath of that.
Right.
And
we
so
can be very unconscious of that for a
absolutely
long time. Right.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
So yeah, no, that makes total sense to me. Thank you. So in that, like, when it comes to like, do you have any sort of practices that you could share with us that will help to bring those together and or clear something out if somebody's kind of hit with something?
I mean, I can offer the practices that are on my YouTube channel. I put practices there to support people. It's not, meant to be a stand-in for actually working with someone. It's important to work with someone, whether it's a shamanic practitioner or therapist or anybody else, in order to get that reflection.
Yeah.
So, and I hesitate to say, oh, try this or try this, because everybody's different. And some people are going to need some cord clearing and forgiveness, and some people are going to need some soul retrieval we could use all of that, but based on whatever they're bringing. So, but on my YouTube channel, you mentioned some of those videos, and they're audio, really. There's no video there. There's a video of me doing interpretive dance. No, I'm just kidding. Totally kidding. Just a recording. And cord clearing and forgiveness is probably the most watched shamanic journey I have on there, and that's why I recorded it, because it's so powerful, to help start stepping out of those hooks, cords, and attachments that we have with people, not just in this lifetime, but throughout lifetimes, timelines, dimensions, and realms. As far as specifically that disconnect within ourselves that we may not even be fully aware of, there's a general soul retrieval recording there. But it's important. I would encourage people to go and sit with someone who can do soul retrieval and actually do some of that work. When we have, even if it's not extreme trauma, there's trauma that's so obviously trauma. And then there can be little things that happen even as adults that we just don't realize a soul piece just kind of disengaged because we didn't, if you almost hit somebody with your car, but you don't, like in that jolt, a piece, a soul piece can kind of step out because that's a protective mechanism. And so to be doing the soul retrieval work can definitely help with bringing those pieces together. I work with lineage, karma clearing. There's a video of that there. I mean, definitely working with the ancestral programs and energies and wounds, as well as gifts that have been passed down through our DNA. the collective programs. I mean, there's definitely a lot of ways to go, but yeah, checking out the YouTube, just Bloom post on YouTube, there's things they can check out. But I would also just caution that if someone starts using those videos and if it feels too intense or scary or too emotional, and you're in it and you can't really hold the space for yourself, then reach out and we'll do a session. I don't want anybody to create more trauma, through trying to self-heal in any kind of way. I've sat in spaces where it felt traumatic. It was a healing space that felt like I was receiving trauma to heal trauma. And that's just not okay for me. It needs to be a trauma-informed space. So a lot of the videos on there people can do on their own, but sometimes if you're trying to clear cords with a major abuser, you want somebody there who can really hold a safe container for you. And so those are the times when I encourage sitting with someone.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely good advice. I think big difference from like had a bad interaction with someone to, someone you grew up with who is abusive or traumatizing.
Right.
I love the cord clearing video and use it often. Like kind of I talked about for like the smaller sort of icky interactions, or like if something happens with someone who's not, fully in my life, but has deeply upset me or, and I love them. I'm a huge fan of that particular video. So
can I just mention real quick, since you mentioned that, you can use the cord clearing and forgiveness video for people you never want to see again and really don't want to have a relationship with, but you can also use it for people you love and adore.
Yeah.
You can use it to clean up the energy in your partnership. I was taking care of a dog. I had a dog and she had come from abuse. I had her, and for the first day or two, she wouldn't even let me pet her. This was years ago. And I was feeling triggered because I couldn't help her feel safe. And my friend said, why don't you just do a cord clearing with her? I'm like, of course, so I did the cord clearing. And the next day she just started to open up. And so I just want people to know that it's not just about removing people from your world, because that's not really what it's about at all. It's throughout lifetimes, timelines, dimensions, and realms, so that whatever our experience was with them in another realm where maybe we were not the nice person, we're cleaning that up too. But it's not a cutting. And cord cutting was something I was trained in traditionally and learned through my guides over years of practice. I kept watching myself and others cut the cords, but it just kept creating resistance, which created persistence. It wouldn't really fully clean up. And we were cutting the cords just here in this third dimensional experience, this lifetime. So learning from my guides over the years to do cord clearing and forgiveness so that we clean up the unhealthy attachments and empower the healthy connections. So if there's somebody you don't want in your sphere, you're creating forgiveness, you're cleaning it up throughout all the lifetimes, timelines, dimensions, and realms, and then you're in a certain vibration that they just can't link with anymore. So there's a lot more grace and ease to it. And I will say that my whole world is about grace and ease at this point. So there's a lot of grace and ease to it. And I want people to know that it can be used with people, places, situations, and things. And it can be used even with people you love and adore, even with your kids. You just want to clean up the energy, and then you have a healthier connection with them. So I just want to put that in there. And as far as, you were talking about using it with people maybe you have a funky interaction with is different than some, a DNA or an ex-boyfriend or ex-girlfriend or whatever. Often we need to do the cord clearing more than once with those kinds of relationships. Whereas if somebody at the grocery store just really hurt your feelings, you could probably do it once and be good. But, like you said, if there's more energy, if there's DNA, if there's sexual relationship, all of that, then you probably want to do it more than once until it feels really clear for you.
Thank you for clarifying that. Yeah, I've done it with my mother, with whom I have a tough relationship, and a number of different things. I always feel better afterwards, regardless. Yeah. So
that's wonderful.
Thank you for sharing that. I really want to dive in before we have to close things down. just to talk about cacao for a hot minute, because I am such a huge fan of cacao. I would drink it every morning. It eventually makes me break out, unfortunately. But I'd love to hear why cacao is such a powerful plant medicine, and like why you choose to work with it. Potentially some of the benefits, those sorts of things with folks. I love cacao so much.
Yeah. Well, and it's an antioxidant, so that's part of why it's not really great to drink every day. I know from personal experience, having tried it. And also with cacao, if you drink or ingest more than about 2.5 ounces of it per day, it can make you really sick. And there was a time in my life when I just didn't believe that the basis of chocolate could ever, no, you can't have enough chocolate. And so I would try more to see, no, it's not a good idea. I learned the hard way. So cacao is the basis of chocolate. It's a superfood. It's very popular and trendy now, and it's an antioxidant, and it amps up when you ingest it, it's I'm forgetting the word, but it opens up the blood flow and the brain and all of that, and it hits those dopamine receptors similar to cannabis and other plant medicines. So it can be a very heart-opening experience. It's been called the food for the shift, things like that. And it really is meant, for me at this point in my life, it really is meant to be used only as medicine. I don't really eat chocolate or drink cacao regularly anymore, because it really is such a powerful plant medicine. I choose to work with it because she chose me. I work with I work with different plant medicines, but the ones that I work and share with people are the ones that asked me to do so. And again, my response back in the day when the plants would ask, well, oh no, I couldn't possibly, what do I do? And then they would show me. And it all flowed. It was just part of that natural process, because I used to lead ceremonies without ingesting anything at all, and connecting in with the energetics, with the spirits of things energetically, and empowering people in that way, singing medicine songs, shamanic journeying, and then having the plants make their way into my life and ask me to be a conduit for them. So that's how I came to it, and also why I do it, because she asked me to. And then I went to Peru and I did a traditional tree dieta with an ayahuasquero with cacao, which they don't really do traditional dietas with cacao. But that I found an ayahuasquero who would do that for me. And so really just creating a relationship with the plants it's just so important for me and my journey. But cacao can be so supportive to people in a ceremonial space to open the heart, help with more grace and ease, and without being psychotropic. It's not psychedelic, but it has the grace and ease to start pushing some of that overthinking out of the way, so that we can really, really connect with our hearts. It's a beautiful medicine. She's very powerful, just as powerful as any psychotropic, but she can bring a lot of grace and ease.
Yeah. I love cacao. All right, Miss Bloom. So let's go ahead and dive into the lightning round. And I'm going to be shifting one of my very last questions a little bit for us. But so number one, what is the one habit that you can't live without?
I know I'm supposed to give you like short little concise answers, but my practice has been to not have habits, but to have practices. This is all about conscious languaging. I know I'm ruining the fun of your lightning round. And it's important to me because habits to me are things that we do unconsciously when we fall back, when we're in our poop and we're not, we fall back on habits, and I choose to fall back on practices. So a practice did you say I cannot live without?
Yep.
So I would say a practice that I consciously choose to not live without is right now, my most fun practice that I'm enjoying is every morning, the first thing I do is juice celery juice. And I start my day with a glass of water and a glass of celery juice to live that food as medicine thing. So food as medicine is definitely a practice that I cannot live without.
Love it. Okay. Number 2, what does spirituality mean for you?
These are big questions for a lightning round. You're supposed to ask me like my favorite color or something. What's your favorite curse word?
I like to challenge my guests.
I know. I love it though. I love it. I'm trying to come up with a quick, a pithy answer. Spirituality for me is about connecting with spirit and whatever that means to each human who does so.
All right. Love it. Number 3, advice to anyone who's looking to find their purpose.
Breathe into your belly. You're on your journey, even if you feel like you have no idea where you're going or what you're doing, that is part of the journey. And then reach out for somebody who can support you, because we all need reflection. We all need support. We all need someone who has walked their path, hopefully a little longer, who can help us walk ours.
Love it. Okay. And last question, which this isn't a short question. So I would love for you to share with us how different ways in which people can work with you. And then of course, where they can find you.
Oh, sure. That's a lot easier. Bloompost.com, my name, bloompost.com is my website. And there's all sorts of online offerings there. We're actually doing an online event tonight. I offer a monthly mentorship, which is very affordable. We meet the first Tuesday of every month. We always shamanic journey. I do a little teaching and it's recorded. So if you can't be there, you don't miss out on anything. I really encourage people to check that out. I have books on my website, a plant spirit totem book, as well as Shaman's Toolbox, the first book I ever wrote many, many moons ago. We have cacao ceremony every month. We have other ceremonies listed on the website. So my website's the best place to find me, bloompost.com. And as we talked about earlier on YouTube, if you just go to Bloompost, there's all sorts of videos there. You can see me being serious. You can see me being goofy. You can see all the things. And then the shamanic journeys that we talked about. So, and if someone wants to work with me, send me an email. You don't have to live in Western North Carolina to work with me. I work with people from all over the world, and the work is done in the realms. So you don't have to be in person to get the same, experience, to get the same response, to get the same support. So yeah, lots of different ways to work with people. And I really do love this work. I keep calling it work, but it's never been a job for me. It's always been a calling. I absolutely love it. This is work it's not even work. It's just my passion. It's my calling. It's the practice. And I absolutely love doing it. And I love sitting with people. So yeah.
I call it the soul path.
Yeah, it's definitely my soul path. I'm so grateful. I mean, and that's the vision I hold for people, is that they get to live into their gifts and their medicine and their soul journey, whatever that is. Be the maestra version of you. And again, that might be the most amazing mother on the planet, doing all this mojo for your kids and being with community. It might be that you want to do healing work. You might want to be in sports. It doesn't matter. You can still bring all of your medicine to any path and just thrive. And I just really hold that vision for everybody.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Bloom, and sharing your time with us. I could keep talking to you for, a long time, but really appreciate your time and your wisdom and sharing with us. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I super appreciate it.
It's been fun. Fun. We made it through.
We did.
All right, folks, if you were inspired by today's interview, make sure to share it with someone who could benefit. Leave us a review on iTunes. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and sign up for my email list, where I share everything from podcast updates to helpful resources. Don't forget, when we invest in ourselves, the world benefits. Until next week.